and welcome back to the Think and Nick podcast. I'm your host, Nick Daniels, and this is episode 12 now. No, 13. And I'm joined by Nicola. Nicola,
Wow.
how are we? How are we today?
13 episodes.
I know.
That's incredible. That's like half a year.
Almost, yeah. Well, we started when? In September, I'd say we started. No, we pushed it back. Remember, but we started recording in September, but we pushed the launch to October. Do you remember that?
Right. That's true. So it's actually not half a year, quarter of a year. It's 3 months.
Yeah. Still, every week consistently is, it's pretty cool. All right.
Yeah.
So in today's episode, guys, we are going to be talking about the triple bottom line, which is known as people, planet, and profit in that order. So my understanding of the triple bottom line is people comes first. Why? Because people are the most important. Things like relationships really matter. The second one is planet. All businesses nowadays have to have some sort of integration in or some sort of carbon footprint. We talk about, being green in the business a business term. And then the final one is profit. And profit's obviously very important for businesses as they need to be profitable in order to be successful. So the triple bottom line, basically, all people must benefit in some way. Nicola, what is your insight on the triple bottom line?
So this concept actually came about many years ago, and people, planet, profit, what's sometimes referred to as TBL. And I can't actually remember when, but it's a long time ago. But in essence, and bear in mind, I come at this very much from a business point of view, and I'm not an expert in this. But if you think of it the other way around, for organizations, profit was always primary. So you talk about shareholder value. So profit is really the capitalist economy. It's about where success is measured on financial performance. And for many years, businesses started to talk about capital and people, which is perhaps more social, sort of a focus shifting away from just shareholder value to stakeholder value. So that's where a broader set of communities, not just individuals, but communities get impacted by what a business does. So very simply, you can think of customers, you can think of employees, you can think of community members, people impacted by your work or what you do. Think of a mine in the middle of a rural area. There are people in that rural area that are impacted by that business's operation. And then stakeholders might be suppliers, for example. So organizations didn't think of treating suppliers that well. I mean, many do now because they realize the dependency. But sometimes when you supplied a business, you got treated badly as if you were sort of inferior to the customer. And that's changed a lot over the years. And then what's happened more recently, and I think is perhaps the biggest one of all, because without this, the people and the profit disappear, and that's the planet. That's really about sustainability. It's about environment. It's about consumption, consumerism. If you think of the amount of things that we just absorb and throw away, like willy-nilly. And, you go shopping and you come home with plastic bags and plastic containers and things end up in landfill. You've got those horrendous pictures that come out of India with all those bottles and plastic containers floating in the water. So the planet is about organizations doing their bit to ensure that we live on a planet that is healthy.
Yeah, for sure. I know Vietnam are also really bad when it comes to pollution and plastic. Like my carbon footprint that I had in South Africa, like remember how we used to recycle in the house? You would make sure that I would put everything in each bin. Here, there's just no recognition for that. And I'm actually guilty of it as well because nobody here really takes the initiative to do that. And then talking about dependency on suppliers, I mean, COVID-19 has had a massive impact on that because obviously it originated in Wuhan, and China's like a massive supplier around the world everywhere.
Yeah.
And, COVID's completely changed the dynamic now. People are starting to source products from other places. But let's just sort of split them up now. Let's dive into people first, as they do come first.
Okay.
Why do people come first?
Triple bottom line usually says people, planet, profit. I mean, if you think about it, the first point of contact in the world is another being. I mean, there's a wonderful saying where you don't know you exist without another person. So if you didn't have people in your life, you wouldn't even know that Mick Daniels was Nick Daniels, because no one could reflect back to you. So people bring you into this world. People take you out of this world, sometimes in surprising and unpleasant ways. And so life in general is really the series of engagements and experiences we have with other people. And mastering that is sometimes a challenge, because if you've got a dog will still follow you around the house, even if you shouted at it. In fact, sometimes abused dogs will follow their owners loyally wherever they go, even cowering. Whereas a person will often reflect back to you something you don't want to see. Maybe they're reflecting back to you something you don't want to see in yourself. And you can only push a person to a certain point before they recognize that I have an identity and I am going to push back.
Yeah.
So relationships are these sort of energy exchanges of pushing and pulling, giving and taking, back and forth. And although there's these wonderful, monks and people sitting under trees and being very Zen, and I'm not advocating for 1 minute that that's a bad thing, but coming at this from a business angle, which is what I always said I would do.
Yeah.
You don't see many companies being Zen. They're busy doing things. They'd like to be more Zen, and maybe introducing meditation isn't a bad suggestion. But for the most part, you've got people doing, actively ticking things off and making things happen and making decisions and pushing things forward and ultimately competing.
Yeah. So speaking about Zen, let's just sort of sidetrack a little bit into well-being and mindfulness in the workspace. How important do you think that is? Because I know the organization that I work in, they put quite a big emphasis on that, and it's very. I mean, I've noticed it from the last place that I worked at, and it's honestly, it makes me want to be at work sometimes, because they're so, they really do look out for you in that sort of way, compared to my old school anyway. So what do you think the importance of mindfulness and well-being in an organization is?
I think it's very important, extremely important, actually. If you just keep pushing people, it's an unsustainable motive. So you can push and have this performance. We talk about high performance culture, but in a healthy high performance culture, there has to be time for the individual. I think it was after the First and Second World War, we sort of introduced this concept of factories, and people had to work so many hours a day, like 8 hours a day. And you've got to sit at your desk. If you're working at a contact center, you're answering phone calls, you're typing things on a screen, and you've got to do so many hours at your desk. And if you look at human beings sitting at a desk for 8 hours a day, contradicts our physiology. We're designed as a species to be upright, not to sit at a desk all day. So ergonomics, the way your workplace is laid out, is very important. But so is the opportunity within your day to just be mindful and maybe take 10 minutes and breathe, meditate, become aware.
Take a bit of a break, for sure. I think it's very important.
Yeah, very much so.
So now moving on to planet. With the impact of global warming and the move to being, green, does this pose a new challenge for businesses, especially old businesses, or do you think it provides space for innovation?
I want to believe it's a space for innovation. But what we're trying to do is we're trying to reduce emissions from the planet. And when your population doubles in a period of 50 years, and you look at how long this planet's been around, and the degree to which one species has just escalated, one primate species, us,
Taken over.
human beings, human doings,
Yep.
has doubled. I mean, what would happen if any other species on the planet doubled at the rate that we consume in 50 years? So imagine for 1 minute that you took any single species where there were billions of them, ants, for example. There's got to be a lot of ants on this planet, more ants than people.
For
But
sure.
imagine if ants doubled in 50 years. And then what happens if they double again? Because human beings don't seem to be very good at curbing breeding instinct.
But well, they would double. They would double once in 50 years, and then they would double again probably in 25 years, because obviously there's more people, right?
Possibly.
I remember you showing me a book in your house, and it was basically on the environment. It was in the little nook there that you have by the fireplace, and it was basically on one of the pages was a graph from about the 1800s to the year 2010, and the population to scale just went like this, and then as it hit 1980 or something like that, it just went through the roof, it's just going. It's just it's going to continue to grow.
So that's called an exponential curve. And it would be great to actually get some guests on, because today there are experts, or whatever we call an expert, but there are people that take a solid interest in this particular area. And there's some fantastic sort of academic work. So I get exposed to some of it through, the work that I do, but it really is the tip of the iceberg. Yeah. But what we know is the planet cannot sustain itself. It can sustain itself, actually, without people. The planet's fine without us. They say if you took all the bees off the planet, we would collapse. The whole planet would collapse, because we need bees to pollinate plants.
Yeah, vegetation, for sure.
Everything. So we are actually dependent on bees. And that you see a bee and you'll squat it or run away from it. But we're dependent on bees. And yet
I know, it's crazy.
Bees. But
they're declining.
Yeah?
Sorry, they're declining.
Yeah,
the population of bees is declining.
But if you took all the people off the planet would flourish. It would be the Garden of Eden. So it's like, what role can a business play in those three areas? Yes, we need to make a profit. That's what a business exists for. But it's not only about profit. So it's also about people. And you've already said coming to work is much more meaningful when you feel valued, that they care about your well-being.
Yeah.
And then the third thing, but is probably the first thing, is the planet. Without the planet, no people, no profit. No business. How do you balance these things and be aware that if you have got that plastic bag, mindfulness is not just your well-being, it's also paying attention. So when you've got a plastic packet, what you do with it in the moment of disposal, do you throw it straight in the bin? Do you have biodegradable little bags in your dustbin? Do you put your recyclable waste separately? So you're saying in Vietnam, they don't like the word they, but people tend to not be mindful about waste. But it'll take one person to start the movement of mindfulness around waste. And I can guarantee you there are people that care. You've just got to find the movement and attach to it.
Yeah, it's just so densely populated that what you see, I mean, I'm sure there are environmentalists. I know that there are people who do clean up the beaches and stuff like that, but because it's so densely populated and it's just, chaos here, like you'll see when you come to visit, hopefully next year, it's just absolute chaos. But so let's now shift over to profit. We've looked at people, we looked at planet, and I agree with you. I do believe planet's the most important, because without the Earth, none of this, would be possible. And you've touched on this a little bit, but why do organizations look to measure and improve social and environmental impacts in addition to the financial bottom line?
Okay, so if you're an organization and a business, and you've got a board of directors and employees, your obligation is to make sure that that business makes a profit, because it's a business. There's another kind of business that exists called a non-profit. And a non-profit can still be profitable, but the profits are not dispersed to the shareholders. So non-profit means that you basically have a board of directors, and when you make a profit in that business, it is not dispersed to the shareholders of the business. So you can reinvest your profit. You don't have to give it to somebody who owns a share in your business. Whereas a for-profit company, which might be a limited business in England, a Pty Limited in South Africa, a PLC if it's listed in the UK, a limited company if it's listed in South Africa, those entities have shareholders. And let's just take a listed business as an example. They have millions of shareholders. And what those shareholders do, and they're big investors. So you might find a few companies own most of the shares in most of the big listed entities. And then you'll find sometimes individuals own a lot of shares in listed entities. But the big organizations, if you take like Unilever and the global businesses, you'll find a few investors buy shares in those businesses. And a lot of those investors run massive funds. And when you trickle down into these funds, you find that pension funds, when you make a contribution to a pension, those pension funds combine their contributions and they go and invest in businesses, because they've got to get a return on that investment, so that if you invest $10 today, it's worth $100 in the future. Because if you just leave it in the bank, it won't grow fast enough to meet the needs of inflation. So what happens is those investors are going to invest in companies that do two things. It gives them a capital gain, so the value of the share increases over time, and it pays a dividend. The dividend is the payout of the profit to the shareholder. So it's amazing sometimes to me that individuals will be cross about, this company is only focused on profit. And I'm like, yeah. Have you got a retirement annuity? Yes. So do you give your retirement annuity to a fund that's going to give you the best possible return? Yes. So where do they go to find the best possible returns? The company that you're saying is only focused on profit. So it's a circular thing. It's driven by us as consumers to want to secure our futures, particularly financially, and that might vary in societies depending on how much tax you pay and how much they look after their elderly. But for the most part, a lot of people want to retire, be rich, be financially secure. So if you want that, you need the returns. So what I've noticed, and it was probably about 10 years ago that I first came across something called social impact investment, or impact investing. And in those days, it was very new. And it was actually a study that I read from the UK government. I think it was Tony Blair. So it's possibly even more than 10 years ago. And it was really, if you are an investor and you've sort of got your basic needs met, you can invest in funds that have a social impact. You can invest in businesses for triple bottom line gain. Mm-hmm. And in fact, during COVID last year, we should actually look her up, a woman in New York listed a new exchange. I think it's called the Social Impact Exchange in New York, where you could actually list a business that was more, if your whole value proposition was people, planet, profit, and not just profit.
Okay, awesome. So we'll have to check that out. We'll be sure to look that up. Well, there you have it, guys. That is our insight on the triple bottom line, people, profit, and planet. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Nicola, thanks again very much for your time and coming on the show. It was great to see you, and we'll see you again next week. Guys, don't forget to like, follow, share, subscribe, share the love. Okay. Bye, Nicola. See you next week.
Yeah. Cheers, you. Bye, you. Ciao.
For more news and content about Think and Nick, go to www.thinkandnick.com or visit our Facebook or Instagram pages at Think and Nick.